Imagine the opulence of Versailles, the glint of gold, the rustle of silk, and the distinctive scent of ammonia that haunts you in the most luxurious chambers. If you asked a lady-in-waiting during the reign of Louis XVI how she managed to maintain such a clean and fresh complexion, she would, without the slightest embarrassment, tell you about the miraculous power of morning urine. In those days, it wasn't considered shameful or dirty. On the contrary, golden water was elevated to the rank of an elite tonic. Urea, which, incidentally, is still used in expensive cosmetics today, only in a synthetic form, was believed to be the perfect softener for the skin, fight inflammation, and impart that aristocratic glow. Ladies would collect fresh urine, soak fine linen handkerchiefs in it, and apply them to their faces, believing this to be the best way to preserve youth. Some even went so far as to soak entire baths, mixing urine with wine or herbal infusions to achieve a velvety smoothness all over their bodies. Imagine the contrast. Incredible external splendor and, to put it mildly, such naturalistic beauty methods. It was a world where the veneer concealed secrets that would make us shudder in disgust today. But if washing with urine was merely a matter of smell and disgust, the next beauty secret literally took the lives of its owners. If you were transported back to the Renaissance or Victorian England, the first thing you'd notice would be the unnatural, almost ghostly whiteness of the local beauties' faces. Back then, a tan was a mark of a commoner working in the fields, and a true lady was expected to glow with a cold, porcelain-like light. To achieve this effect, women used thick ointments based on purified lard mixed with powdered lead. Imagine the texture. A greasy, thick substance that completely clogged pores, creating a flawless mask on the face. The lard provided shine and elasticity, while the lead imparted that deadly whiteness. Women applied this mixture in layers, not washing it off for weeks, merely touching up the cracks with a new layer of fat. But this beauty came at a terrible price. Lead is a heavy metal that gradually penetrates the bloodstream through the pores. First, women's hair began to fall out, then their teeth decayed, their gums turned gray, and their skin took on a sallow hue, forcing them to apply even more lead white. Ultimately, this led to paralysis, insanity, and a painful death from poisoning. It was a vicious cycle. Makeup slowly destroyed the face, turning it into a rotting wound that could only be concealed with more makeup. Women literally turned themselves into living dolls, whose shells were flawless on the outside but completely destroyed within. However, if lead killed slowly, the next method of improving appearance worked from within, turning the gaze into a shining abyss. And it gets even more interesting. If you thought toxic ointments were the ultimate risk, get ready for a story about women voluntarily ingesting poison. In the 19th century, the image of transparent skin with a slight flush and unnaturally bright, feverish eyes became fashionable. To achieve this effect, pharmacies offered women beauty pills whose main ingredient was arsenic. Yes, that same infamous rat poison. Women believed that tiny doses of arsenic purified the blood and gave the face a noble pallor. At first, the effect was truly stunning. The poison destroyed red blood cells, the skin became thin and pale as parchment, and the eyes acquired that magnetic glow due to the overall intoxication of the body. It looked incredibly romantic and morbid, which perfectly fit the aesthetics of the time. But arsenic tends to accumulate in tissues. Over time, these beauties began to experience horrific side effects. Dark spots appeared on their skin, their thyroid glands swelled, developing into goiters, and their internal organs gradually failed. Those hooked on this cosmetic drug were unable to stop, as abruptly withdrawing from the poison resulted in an immediate deterioration in their appearance and excruciating pain. It was like playing roulette with death, hoping to have passers-by gasp at your ghostly beauty. But if arsenic altered their complexion, women resorted to even more radical and painful procedures to alter the very shape of their skulls. During the High Renaissance, fashion dictated its own, sometimes frightening, canons. A face with an unnaturally high, clear, and prominent forehead was considered ideal. This was considered a sign of profound intelligence and divine origin, so women resorted to extreme torture to get rid of their low hairline. If nature hadn't blessed a woman with a bald spot all the way to the crown, radical cosmetology was used. Beauties would prepare a caustic mixture of quicklime and hot wood ash, which they would rub into the hair roots along the forehead. This hellish mixture caused deep chemical burns, literally scorching the hair follicles along with the top layer of skin. After this procedure, the forehead not only became higher, but also acquired the characteristic sheen of scar tissue, which was considered incredibly attractive at the time. Those who were more timid plucked one hair daily with tweezers, but the effect of this chemical hair removal lasted longer. Imagine these women. With burnt, inflamed skin, then coated with layers of whitewash, they proudly carried their high intellect through the halls of palaces. It was a striving for the ideal that literally erased the features of the human face, turning it into a frozen mask. But if the face was supposed to be lifeless and pale, then the eyes, on the contrary, were supposed to sparkle with a bewitching fire, even if it meant blindness. The following beauty secret will surely surprise you. Imagine a woman whose gaze captivates you in the dim light of a ballroom. Her pupils are so dilated that the iris is barely visible, and her eyes glow with a feverish, almost mystical gleam. During the Renaissance and later, in Victorian times, this was considered the height of seduction. To achieve this femme fatale effect, beauties used the juice of belladonna, a plant whose name literally translates from Italian as beautiful woman. They dropped this poisonous extract directly into their eyes. The alkaloids contained in the plant paralyzed the eye muscles responsible for pupil constriction. As a result, the pupils froze in their maximum dilation, creating the illusion of a deep, passionate gaze. But the price of this fleeting appeal was horrific. Belladonna is a powerful hallucinogen and poison. Constant use of the drops resulted in women losing their sight in bright light and suffering from terrible headaches, hallucinations, and dry mouth. Eventually, complete blindness set in, as the poison destroyed the optic nerve. Women literally went blind from their own desire to be desirable, turning their lives into perpetual darkness so that others would see only a bottomless abyss in their eyes. But while belladonna's effect on the eyes was unnoticeable, the next beauty elixir literally ate away at the skin, forcing it to renew itself through inhuman pain. And it gets even more interesting. Imagine walking up to the mirror and seeing a scattering of freckles or a small age spot on your face. These days, it seems like a cute feature, but in centuries past, it was considered dirt, unworthy of a noblewoman. To get rid of these sun marks, women used mercury ointments. Mercury, a heavy and incredibly aggressive metal, acted as a monstrous chemical peel when applied to cosmetic ointments. When applied to the skin, mercury literally dissolved the top layer of the epidermis, along with unwanted spots. The skin underneath initially looked alarmingly pink, thin, and delicate, perceived as a triumph of beauty. But the joy was short-lived. Mercury didn't just cleanse the surface, it was absorbed into the pores, poisoning the body from within. The unfortunate women's teeth began to blacken and become loose. An unbearable putrid odor emanated from their mouths, and over time, their skin acquired a gray, lifeless hue and became covered with deep ulcers. The result was horrific. Striving for a perfectly clear complexion, these women transformed their skin into a rotting surface that could never be restored. They literally dissolved their faces in pursuit of an illusory ideal, becoming hostage to a toxic metal that slowly devoured their flesh. But when the skin was already hopelessly damaged by mercury ulcers or smallpox scars, a cunning disguise came into play, becoming a veritable language of secret signs. The following fact will surely surprise you. Imagine the morning of an 18th century noblewoman. She sits in front of the mirror, and her maid pulls out not an elegant tube of toothpaste, but a bag of crushed red brick and coal dust. Yes, this is exactly what premium dental care looked like. Back then, white teeth were as rare as clear skin, as sugar was just coming into fashion and mercilessly eroded the enamel of aristocrats. To restore their smiles' shine, people used abrasives that today we would be afraid to use even on a frying pan. The fired brick chips acted like coarse sandpaper, scraping off plaque along with the top layer of enamel. Teeth did indeed become whiter for a while, but under the influence of the brick dust, they were worn down to translucent splinters. The pain was unbearable, and the enamel wore away, opening a path to the nerves and causing terrible inflammation. To freshen the breath and remove the blackness, charcoal was used. Imagine the process. The crunch of crumbs on your teeth, your gums bleeding from the sharp edges of the brick, and black dust clogging every crevice. It was pure torture for the sake of a fleeting smile, which ultimately led to tooth loss by the age of 30. But in a world where sugar was considered a sign of wealth, rotten teeth were the norm, and cleaning them with bricks was a desperate attempt to maintain status. Women literally ground their smiles to dust, hoping that at the next ball their teeth would shine brighter than the candles in the candelabra. But if cleaning your teeth with bricks seems harsh to you, the ingredients in Roman face masks will make you rethink the concept of natural cosmetics. The next beauty secret will definitely surprise you. Imagine a noblewoman of the Roman Empire spending a fortune on a small jar of a thick, pungent-smelling substance. If you were to look at the ingredients of this elite product, you'd find crocodile excrement. In ancient Rome, reptile excrement was believed to have unique rejuvenating properties and to smooth out wrinkles better than any oil. Women would apply this foul-smelling paste to their faces and bodies, taking baths in a mixture of crocodile dung, mud, and warm water. This mask was believed to draw out all toxins from the skin and give it incredible elasticity. The smell was so intense that it had to be masked with liters of concentrated floral oils and incense, but fashionistas were adamant. For smooth skin, even the scent of a terrarium was worth enduring. These masks would dry on the face like a crust, tightening the skin, which was mistaken for a lifting effect. In fact, the bacteria contained in excrement often caused terrible inflammations and suppurations, which then had to be treated with even stranger methods. The Roman Empire gave us law and architecture, but its cosmetology was literally steeped in dirty secrets that would immediately shut down any aesthetic medicine clinic today. Roman women were willing to smell like a swamp, as long as their skin remained as smooth as that of marble statues of goddesses. But if reptile excrement was smeared on the face, equally shocking animal-based ingredients were used to wash the hair. Imagine an elegant Victorian-era bathroom. Bottles with intricate labels line the shelf, and the air is thick with the scent of roses and something metallic, something animalistic. If you were to look inside the ingredients of the most expensive shampoo of the era, you would find fresh pig bile. In those days, women were obsessed with achieving a mirror-like shine, while regular soap left their locks dull and stiff due to its alkaline nature. Pig bile, thanks to its natural enzymes, perfectly broke down sebum and literally polished the hair from the inside. Women rubbed this greenish, sticky, and pungent substance into their scalps, massaging the roots until a thick lather formed. The effect was truly astounding. Hair after such a wash shone as if cast from silk. But there was one detail that was impossible to ignore: the smell. Even after repeated rinses with vinegar water or rose infusion, the slightest moisture or exposure to the hot sun would cause their hair to emit a distinct slaughterhouse aroma. Fashionable women resorted to a trick. They wore tiny bags of dried lavender and musk in their hair to somehow mask the stench of their bilious beauty. This was an era where luster was valued more than basic hygiene, and pig bile was considered an elixir fit for a queen. Women literally turned their heads into testing grounds for biological experiments, just so their locks would shimmer in the light like precious satin. But if bile was simply unpleasant, the next skin-brightening product of the early 20th century promised not just shine, but a genuine healthy glow, which ultimately killed from the inside. The following fact will definitely surprise you. Imagine the early 20th century, an era of great discoveries and the innocent belief that science was magic, granting eternal life. After Marie Curie discovered radium, the world was gripped by radiation fever. Cosmetics companies like the French brand Radia began producing powders, creams, and lipsticks containing thorium chloride and radium bromide. Advertising posters promised women healthy glowing skin, improved microcirculation, and instant rejuvenation. And the skin did indeed glow literally. The radioactive elements caused mild vascular irritation, giving the complexion a delicate pink hue, which was taken as a sign of thriving health. Women applied these creams at night, unaware that their cells were being continuously bombarded with alpha particles. Over time, this healthy glow turned into terrible burns that took months to heal. Jaws began to crumble, teeth fell out, and malignant tumors developed in the place of a delicate glow. It was the most insidious trap in the history of beauty. An invisible killer packaged in an elegant jar with a pink lid. Fashionistas of the time voluntarily transformed their dressing tables into miniature nuclear reactors, believing radiation to be the light of youth. But this light came at the cost of the decay of their own flesh, turning them into ghosts while they were still alive. However, if radiation destroyed the body from both the outside and the inside, the next method of fighting for an ideal figure involved implanting a living monster within oneself. Imagine an exquisite Victorian dinner. A woman in a tight corset barely touches her food, yet melts away before your eyes, becoming frighteningly slender. The secret of her success lay in a small apothecary bottle of pills, which contained not medicine, but a living creature. In pursuit of painful thinness and a wasp-like waist, women voluntarily swallowed capsules containing tapeworm eggs or larvae. The plan was simple and monstrous. The parasite would settle in the intestines and begin to consume everything the woman ate. The woman could feast, indulging in desserts, while the worm grew inside her, sometimes reaching several meters in length. It was an extreme diet that turned the body into an incubator for the monster. The women truly did shrink to the bone, their skin turned pale, and their eyes sank, perfectly fitting the fashionable consumptive look. But the price was inevitable. The worm stole not only calories, but also all the vitamins, causing terrible anemia, constant nausea, and nervous system damage. And the most terrifying moment was the process of excretion, when the parasite could begin to exit through the mouth or nose, causing suffocation. It was a marriage of beauty and parasitology, where a woman agreed to share her blood and flesh with a worm, if only her corset would be a few centimeters tighter. But while these internal monsters helped her figure, the external structures on the ladies' heads became a veritable paradise for rodents and insects. Imagine an 18th century ballroom. Ladies bow gracefully, trying not to make any sudden head movements, as entire architectural masterpieces rested on their shoulders. During the era of Marie Antoinette, hairstyles reached a meter in height, concealing wire frames, pillows, and tons of backcombed hair. To prevent all this splendor from crumbling under its own weight and to keep its shape for weeks, hairdressers used a pomade made from pure lard. Imagine a thick, sticky layer of animal fat mixed with flour for whiteness, literally cementing the hair together. But this had a downside: a foul smell. Lard quickly rancid on warm hair, emitting a heavy odor that was masked with powder and perfume. But the worst began at night. The smell of lard and flour attracted not only flies and lice to bedrooms, but also the true masters of the underground mice and rats. Rodents would crawl into these giant nests, while women slept in special chairs to protect their hair. There were even cases of mice chewing holes right through their hair, creating their burrows. Women were forced to wear special wire mesh cages on their heads at night to protect their hair from the teeth of intruders. It was a triumph of form over substance. On the outside, paradise gardens with ships and birds on the inside, rotting lard and squeaking parasites. Beauty of that time required more than just sacrifice, it required a willingness to turn one's head into a communal apartment for rodents. But if mice in hair were a hidden nightmare, the next procedure exposed the blue blood with deadly dyes. And it gets even more interesting. Imagine a refined enlightenment salon, where candlelight falls softly on the bare shoulders and arms of ladies seated at the harpsichord. If you look closely, you'll notice something strange on their skin. Thin blue veins stand out clearly through the alabaster whiteness, branching like rivers on a map. At the time, this was considered the absolute standard proof of blue blood and the fact that a woman was so noble and fragile that she had never seen sunlight or engaged in physical labor. But nature rarely bestowed such transparency, so artistic painting came to the rescue. The ladies first covered their arms, neck, and chest with a thick layer of lead white, creating the effect of lifeless statues. Then, using fine brushes and blue paint made from poisonous indigo or even lapis lazuli with heavy metal impurities, they carefully painted on the false veins. This was true makeup, transforming a living person into an anatomical specimen. Women sat motionless for hours in front of mirrors while maids drew every vein, striving to make it as natural as possible. The tragedy was that the lead in the white lead corroded living skin, turning it yellow and wrinkled, forcing the veins to be painted on an even thicker layer of poison. This was the aesthetics of aging elevated to a cult, where fake health was imitated through the display of fragility and illness. But if blue veins were merely a visual deception, the next method for achieving perfect pallor involved voluntarily destroying one's own body from within using a common kitchen ingredient. Imagine the vanity of a medieval European lady. Among elegant flasks of rose water and ivory combs sits a plain little pot containing a grayish, foul-smelling substance. If you were to open it, you'd be greeted by a breathtaking stench of decay. In those harsh times, hair loss was considered more than just a cosmetic defect, but a divine punishment or a sign of a profound illness. To restore hair to its former thickness, doctors and herbalists recommended a tried and true remedy, an ointment made from decomposed rats. The rodents were caught, killed, and left in sealed jars until their flesh turned into a smooth paste. It was believed that the vitality and resilience of the rats, capable of surviving in any conditions, would be transferred to the hair follicles. Women rubbed this nauseating mixture into their scalps, wrapped their heads in warm shawls, and left it overnight, hoping for a miracle. Imagine this level of self-control. Sleeping with rotting remains on your head, believing that tomorrow morning you'd see a thick head of hair in the mirror. In reality, this therapy led to severe skin infections, sepsis, and even worse, baldness due to the cadaveric poison. It was a desperate attempt to trick nature with the help of death itself, turning self-care into a true ritual from a horror movie. But while rotting rats were the preserve of the desperate, aristocrats used chemicals today used in the production of explosives to radically renew their facial skin. Imagine an alchemist's laboratory, where dangerous compounds simmer in copper retorts and the air is thick with acrid smoke. This is precisely what the cosmetic kitchen of medieval nobility looked like, determined to renew their skin at all costs. To get rid of scars, freckles, and the marks of time, women used a mixture of saltpeter and sulfur components we today associate more with gunpowder and matches than with facial care. This was a true chemical peel in its most primitive and merciless form. Ladies applied this caustic paste to their faces, feeling their skin begin to burn with an unbearable fire. Sulfur and saltpeter literally ate away the upper layers of the epidermis, causing a controlled and sometimes not so controlled chemical burn. It was believed that along with the burned skin, all its imperfections would disappear, and they would be replaced by a new, baby-clean surface. After the procedure, the face would become covered in scabs that would peel painfully for weeks, leaving behind thin, bright pink, and extremely sensitive tissue. Women hid in dark rooms, not daring to expose themselves to the sun, as the slightest ray could cause irreparable pigmentation. It was literally playing with fire. One false move, one extra second of exposure, and instead of beauty, a woman would receive lifelong scars and a disfigured face. But the desire for perfect skin was stronger than the fear of explosive mixtures, turning aristocrats' bedrooms into alchemical workshops. However, while the face was burned with sulfur, they tried to disguise body odor with ingredients extracted from the deepest oceans and the entrails of sea giants. And what happens next is even more interesting. Imagine a refined woman whose face resembles a constellation map. A coquettish heart adorns her cheek, a tiny moon above her lip, and a neat carriage perched just at her temple. These aren't tattoos or just a whim of fashion, but the famous beauty spots, false spots of black velvet, taffeta, or the finest leather that became a wild trend in the 17th and 18th centuries. But their origins were far from romantic. Europe at the time was literally ravaged by smallpox, which spared neither the poor nor kings. Those lucky enough to survive were left with deep, ugly scars, pockmarks, that transformed their once beautiful faces into a lunar landscape. To conceal these traces of the disease, as well as the rotting sores caused by those very mercury cosmetics we mentioned earlier, women began covering them with pieces of black cloth. The contrast of jet black velvet against the lead-bleached face was so striking that the defect became a statement. Soon, a whole language of beauty spots emerged. A spot in the corner of the eye signified passion, on the right cheek marriage, and above the upper lip a readiness to flirt. Women carried special boxes, beauty spots, and could change their face several times a night, depending on the mood of their interlocutor. This seductive game hid a sad reality. Beneath every velvet heart lurked the tragedy of ruined skin and the fear of social condemnation. It was the greatest illusion in the history of beauty, where a scrap of fabric separated social success from total oblivion. But while a face could be pasted over with velvet, a smile was far more complex, and the methods for enhancing it resembled the work of a builder rather than a cosmetologist. Imagine an elegant Victorian dinner, where instead of fine wines or juices, a young woman drinks glasses of ordinary table vinegar. In the 19th century, a strange and frightening fashion for consumptive beauty swept the world. It was believed that a true aristocrat should look as if she were about to faint from exhaustion or illness. Translucent skin, sunken cheeks, and a sickly fragility. To achieve this, young women voluntarily poisoned themselves with massive amounts of vinegar. The acid in such doses was devastating. It literally destroyed red blood cells, causing severe anemia. Hemoglobin levels dropped to critical levels, and the natural flesh vanished forever, replaced by that coveted deathly pallor. But the price for this porcelain look was terrible. Constant consumption of vinegar corroded the stomach lining, causing ulcers and excruciating pain, and the body, deprived of adequate nutrition, began to literally digest itself. Women deliberately reduced themselves to the state of living shadows, believing gastritis and anemia to be a small price to pay for the right to be considered refined. It was a triumph of aesthetics over biology, where a common kitchen seasoning was transformed into an instrument of slow suicide for the sake of looking like the heroine of a tragic novel. But if vinegar destroyed the body from within, then methods that today would be considered pure horror were used to save thinning hair. And it gets even more interesting. Imagine an elegant ball at Versailles. Mirrors, hundreds of candles, the glitter of diamonds, and an unbearable, heavy mixture of scents that would make a modern person dizzy. In an era when washing the body was considered dangerous to one's health, it was believed that water opened the pores to disease. Aristocrats went months without bathing. To conceal the stench of unwashed flesh, perfumers used the heaviest and most viscous substances nature could provide. Whale blubber and ambergris served as the base for elite perfumes. Ambergris is a waxy substance formed in the digestive tract of sperm whales. When fresh, it smells like feces, but after years in the ocean, it acquires a complex, sweetish, earthy aroma. Ladies literally slathered themselves in thick ointments made from these fats, which remained for hours, creating a dense cocoon of scent around the wearer. This greasy layer mixed with sweat, powder, and dirt, turning the skin into a sticky surface that attracted dust. But it was precisely this heavy, animalistic scent that was considered a sign of the upper class. The more expensive the ambergris in your perfume, the higher your status, even if, beneath a layer of lace, your body hadn't seen clean water in a year. It was survival perfume. The scent of whale entrails became the only barrier between social propriety and the biological reality of a filthy body. But while the body was camouflaged with whale blubber, the scalp was refreshed with a substance that is now used to clean plumbing fixtures. Imagine an elegant boudoir of the late 19th century. On the vanity, among crystal bottles, sits a pharmacy bottle with a sharp, eye-watering, irritating scent. It's ammonia. In an era when washing your hair was a day-long affair and hair took an excruciatingly long time to dry, women sought a way to dry their hair. Ammonia was believed to be the ideal solvent for sebum and dust. Ladies would soak sponges in this caustic solution and thoroughly scrub their scalps, parting their hair. Ammonia fumes filled the room, triggering coughing fits and dizziness, but the result was magical. The oily shine disappeared instantly, and hair became fluffy and light. However, this cleanliness came at a price. Healthy skin. Ammonia is an aggressive alkali that literally burned away the protective layer of the epidermis. Constant use of ammonia baths on hair resulted in the scalp becoming crusted, unbearably itchy, and flaky, while the hair follicles themselves died from chemical stress. Hair became brittle as straw, losing its natural pigment, acquiring a strange yellowish tint. But the fear of greasy locks outweighed common sense. Women inhaled toxic fumes, enduring the burning sensation, just so their hair would look fresh at an evening reception, even at the cost of their lungs and skin. But if the scalp suffered from chemicals, then the face was adorned with details borrowed from the most common rodents to match the capricious fashion for thick eyebrows. And it gets even more interesting. Imagine an 18th century lady getting ready for a night out. She's already applied a coat of lead white, pasted on beauty spots, and rouged her cheeks, but there's a problem. The fashion of the time called for thick, dark, and clearly defined eyebrows, but nature, or that same lead, left only a pale shadow in their place. The solution was truly bizarre. Common barn mice came to the rescue. Servants would catch the rodents, carefully remove tiny strips of fur from them, and dry them. These mouse eyebrows were glued on top of her natural eyebrows using tree resin or thick isinglass. Imagine this surreal makeup. To pieces of rodent fur adorning a bleached face. The glue was often unreliable, and in the midst of a heated ball, sweat and candlelight could cause one of the eyebrows to slowly slide toward the eye or even fall off into the gentleman's soup. Furthermore, the scent of the fur attracted cats, and respectable ladies had to be constantly on guard lest a pet decide to hunt right on their face. This was the pinnacle of artificiality, where body parts of dead pests became a symbol of high style and sophistication. But if mice on the face seem strange to you, the last beauty secret on our list will make you shudder at the lengths people have gone to in an attempt to stop time. The final fact is the most frightening. Imagine Europe's darkest legend, Countess Elizabeth Bathory, whose name became synonymous with bloodthirsty madness. But behind the myths of vampirism lurked a very real, albeit monstrous, cosmetic fear of old age. In those days, the theory of life force transfer was widely believed. The blood of young and healthy people was thought to impart its energy and elasticity to aging skin. Wealthy aristocrats, obsessed with wrinkles, ordered rejuvenating baths. These weren't pure blood baths, as one might imagine, but fresh calf or lamb blood mixed with warm milk and herbs was added to the water. It was believed that the iron and proteins in the blood were absorbed into the pores and revitalized the face, restoring its youthful glow. Women lay for hours in this brown, cooling liquid, inhaling the heavy metallic smell, believing that every minute in this bath would erase a year from their faces. In reality, this procedure was a breeding ground for bacteria and could lead to blood poisoning through the slightest scratch. It was the ultimate act of desperation, an attempt to literally steal someone else's life to prolong one's own attractiveness. Beauty, washed in blood, became the final chord in the symphony of horrors of historical cosmetology. And so our list of 21 terrifying facts about past beauty comes to an end. We've gone from poisonous lead to mouse-like eyebrows and radioactive creams.